In the third part of our jersey top tutorial, we'll be inserting the sleeves, sewing the side seams and underarm seams, and hemming our top. I'll link parts 1 and 2 in the description box below so you can watch those if you haven't watched them already. So let's start. In part 2, we put on our neckband and top stitched our seam as well. So we should have our bodice with a nice neckband on there like so. We've also got our sleeves that we cut out in part 1. You should have transferred the markings from the sleeve and the bodice armholes onto the fabric pieces from the pattern pieces. This is especially important with this pattern, the Keep It Simple top from Pattern Emporium, because there is a distinct front and a back to the sleeve. So you do have to have your pattern markings in place to insert your sleeves. So let's get on with putting our sleeves in. So here I am at the overlocker. I have a sleeve piece already in my hand. I've taken off the pattern pieces. You'll notice, like I said, that you will have one notch on one side of the sleeve head, a double notch at the other side of the sleeve head, and also a notch on the centre of the sleeve head there. Now these correspond to a notch, a single notch, which is on the front bodice piece, a double notch which is on the back bodice piece, and that notch is in the centre top of sleeve head is going to match onto the shoulder seam. I'm going to work with right sides together, so the right side of the bodice together with the right side of the sleeve like so, and I'm going to start pinning them in place. I'm going to start by pinning the single notch at the top of the sleeve head to the shoulder seam. As I said, right sides together, so pinning there again perpendicular to the raw edges. You're going to pin with the raw edges together. Then I'm going to find my notch, which is just a single notch, the single notch at the front bodice, which I'm going to match, oops, like so. I'm going to pin those, and then I'm going to match my double notches. So the double notches on the sleeve head are going to match those, the double notches on the back bodice. So get those as closely matching as you can and pop a pin in them. I'm also going to pin the start of the armhole and the start of the sleeve cap at right angles to the raw edge on both sides, like so. And then when those locations or marking points are pinned, then I'm going to put pins in and pin along the raw edges so my sleeve is nicely in place. So I'll meet you again back at the overlocker ready to stitch when I've got my pins in to my garment. Right, so I've now pinned in my sleeve. As you can see, I've used a good amount of pins. I think it's important when you're a beginner sewist to use an amount of pins that makes you feel happy. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if you use a lot of pins, you're a bad sewer. Use as many pins as you feel necessary. So that's the tip from me. So we're going to go and overlock or sew our sleeve into our bodice, armhole or arm side. I'm going to start like I did before. Just popping the seam under here. The seams are 1/4 inch as previously. Don't forget to take out your pins as you arrive with them, otherwise you will damage your knife. So off we go. I need to make sure as well that I'm stitching both layers of fabric and catching both layers in the seam. Now, just as a word of warning, this sleeve is quite curved. It's got quite tight curve. So you will have to take it quite carefully to stitch this seam. But it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. You can take as long as you like. There's absolutely no medals for sewing quickly, as long as you get the neatest sewn seam for you. So let's start sewing. So here we have the sewn seam. You can see that I've stitched my sleeve into the armhole or arm side. This is the reverse side. Try to make sure when you go over the shoulder seam that it lies in the direction that you've pressed it. Otherwise it'll be twisted and it's a bit difficult to press and it's a bit uncomfortable and wear. Also make sure you've got all your edges, all your raw edges caught in the seam. You can check on the outside. You can also check by looking at the outside as well, sorry, the inside and the outside, just to make sure there are no apparent holes, because when you're a beginner sometimes you can miss a bit of the fabric. I'm just going to pop in my second sleeve and then I'm going to press my seams. Right, so I've stitched my sleeves in and I've pressed them at the ironing board. You can see that that's a really nice, neat seam that I have there on the sleeve. I've pressed my seams towards the sleeve, by the way, not towards the bodice, towards the sleeve, which gives a nice finish. What I've also done, I've also pressed this sleeve seam using a tailor's ham, which is one of these things. It's a shaped, stuffed pressing aid, stuffed with sawdust or something like that, I think. Mine's feeling a bit sort of soft now because I've used it a lot. It's really useful for pressing curves such as sleeve seams, trousers, etc. So if you intend to sew a lot of garments with sleeves or trouser crotches, etc., get one of these because they are absolutely invaluable and they don't cost a huge amount of money. Time for a quick cup of tea. Now the good news is that your top is almost finished. The tricky parts have all been done. The neckband is on and the sleeves are in. So that means it's plain sailing from now on. So what we have to do now is stitch the side seams and the sleeve underarm seam. But on this garment, we have got stripes, of course. So we'll have to match our stripes carefully using pins before we stitch. And I'll show you quickly how to do that. Again, with the garments right sides together, so we're working on the wrong side, what I always do is first of all locate my sleeve seam and pin that first. It's just a good central point to pin, and so we know we've got that anchored. Now hopefully your seams will be matching just like that. If they're not, just make sure that they are. Pin them in place. The next thing that I pin is the bodice, at the bodice hem at the bottom of the bodice. Again, pin that. We mustn't forget to match our stripes, and then the next thing that I pin is the sleeve cuff end. And one thing you can do at this stage, by the way, is finish your sleeve hems, as in finish with the overlocker, and your bodice hems, which I think I'll do now actually, because it saves having to fiddle about and do them when the seams are stitched. So once your underarm seam and the top and the bottom of the garment, and the sleeves are pinned, you can then concentrate on matching the stripes at the side seam and the underarm seam. So you can see, if I show you these raw edges, that they roll slightly to the wrong side, but which exposes the stripe. So all I'm going to do is just make sure those stripes are matched and pop a pin in, like that. And again, make sure they're matched and pop in a pin. These are quite fine stripes anyway, and they are spaced about 1/2 centimetre apart. So the stripes are not too difficult to match, and they are sort of wide and narrow stripes. They're kind of brushstroke stripes, if you see what I mean. They're not even, they're kind of blurred slightly and brushstrokey. So as long as they're matched roughly at the side seams, they don't have to be absolutely bang on, but make sure that you don't get a stripe halfway between the stripe on the other side, if you see what I mean, because that just looks like you haven't taken your time. So taking your time at this stage will result in a much better garment. Also, whilst you're pinning, on this pattern there are a couple of notches or marks on the sleeve seam, and I think it's between the elbow on the sleeves. So match your notches to make sure your sleeve seam is correct. Now that my seam is pinned, I'm going to run this through the overlocker from the bottom of the hem to the bottom of the sleeve continuously. So I'm not going to stop at all. I'm going to do one continuous seam. I've just finished stitching the side seams and sleeve seams, and I've pressed them at the ironing board. I've pressed the side seams towards the back of the garment, and then followed that seam through and pressed the sleeve seam to the back of the sleeve. So that's the inside of our garment. If I just pull the sleeve through, you'll see that's a really nice seam there. Our garment is almost finished. All I have to do is to stitch the bottom hem and the sleeve hems as well. Now this is a step that a lot of sewists are quite worried about, but I'm going to show you really quickly what I do, and hopefully you'll find it as easy as me. Now we are coming to the final steps of sewing our top. I have pinned the hem in place, ready to stitch. What I've done with this top, I already know that I have to shorten it for myself, so I've already shortened the pattern pieces so that they're the right length for me, and the sleeve pieces too. So it's at this stage that you would normally try on your top to make sure it's the right length and that sleeves are the right length for yourself. But I have gone ahead and marked my hem depth. The hem depth is actually given on the pattern itself. I usually use a 2 centimetre hem depth because I think that's just right for the garments that I wear, and I like that hem depth. So I've already marked that with pins already using this gadget. It's a prim seam marker. I don't know if you can see that. Quite difficult to see. It's see-through, but it's a seam marker, and it has individual measurements on here that you can use just to pop onto your fabric and just at a glance see the measurement. So I've used a 2 centimetre portion of this to measure all around the bottom of my top. And I've marked the 2 centimetres depth with a pin, as you can see, all the way around. I don't know if you can see that. And then folded the hem over at the pin placement, and then pinned with more pins which are perpendicular to the hem. I've also pressed the hem down so it's nice and flat, ready to stitch. I do press because I'm always worried that I'll get roping, so kind of a wiggly kind of folding on the hem if I don't press and I stitch directly. So starting at one of the side seams, I like to press my left hand, start at the left hand seam as I'm wearing it. So I'll be wearing it like that. So my left hand seam is here. I'm quite pernickety when it comes to things like this. So starting at this seam here, I'm going to start stitching. Now I'm going to start my stitching with a straight stitch for a few stitches and a lock stitch, but then I'm going to switch to triple zigzag stitch, which I don't know if you can see this here, but it's number 7 on my machine, if you can see that. And I'm going to use the zigzag foot. So I'm just going to put that on and choose straight stitches again. I've also taken the, I've got the free arm on at the moment, so I've taken off the extra work space of the machine. I'm going to put that on there, and I'm going to use the overlocking as a guide. So the overlocking has 2 rows of straight stitching, and I'm going to keep the sort of notchy bit of my foot on those lines of stitching to give me a straight line. I prefer to use the triple zigzag stitch because it is stretchy for jersey fabrics, and it's not as complicated as using a cover stitch machine or a twin needle, and it gives elasticity to the hem, which of course you need with the jersey fabric. So I'm just going to round it down and a lock stitch. A few stitches, and I'm going to go to my triple zigzag stitch and stitch all along my hem, taking the pins out as I go. And I'm just approaching the end of the stitching of the hem here. And the final few stitches are just in straight stitch again, the lock stitch at the end. So take this off the machine. We have a nice stretchy hem. So all we have to do now is finish our sleeve hems in the same way that we finished our bodice hem, and sew one of our special labels into the neck, and we have finished our top. So that's it, we finished our first garment. Let me just show you what it looks like on the hanger. There we go, I've got my label in there, sleeve seams are done, and the bodice hem is done as well. And here we are, I'm wearing it. Yeah, I really like this actually. The neck is really neat. I do like the way the stripes go up and down rather than around the neck bands. Fits really nicely. Stripes match down the side seams. Yeah, I like that. I'm really pleased with it. This is going to go straight into my winter capsule wardrobe, and I'd like to make a few more colours to add to my wardrobe as well. Thank you so much for joining me for the first garment sew along. It's been absolutely brilliant having you with me. If you have any questions or comments, please pop them into the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the video, and I also have a Ko-fi account. So if you fancy buying me a cup of coffee or tea, that would be fantastic. Join me for the second garment in our Sew a Mini capsule, where I'll be making a really simple pull-on skirt. So until next time, happy sewing. Bye bye.